Welcome all of you for this new video. So today's topic is about clinical investigations. So as we already heard about the clinical data, we so much heard about the clinical evaluation reports and clinical evaluation plans, approximately same clinical evaluation plans. Maybe if you need and then I can give describe. So on the same time, there is a clinical investigations. So before the clinical investigation, first understand this clinical investigation also the two types, like two kind: clinical investigations plans and then clinical evaluations, clinical investigations reports. So both are two different things. So why it is first needed? First we understand these things. So for any medical devices, once any manufacturer wants it made to the market, then they have to do some clinical investigations. Now, clinical investigations is done on the humans and animal trials. Now, when it is needed, the human animal trials, especially when the medical devices is the high risk devices or moderate to high risk devices or moderate risk devices. So as we already know about that medical devices are the four types according to the European Medical Device Regulation, which is a class A, class B, class C, and class D. Now we understand the class A or class 1, which is a low risk devices, but the class 2A and class 2B, the 2A is a moderate risk devices and class 2B is moderate to the high risk devices, and class 3 is a high risk devices. So as we understand these things, so if any medical devices, if the risk factor is high, then we have to do some proper clinical investigations, and especially if that particular medical devices is going to be used inside the human or is going to touch the human body fluids or like blood, sweat, saliva or anything, or maybe the human contacts, then definitely the risk factor become higher. So we have to do some proper risk analysis or investigation, clinical investigations. And first we perform the clinical investigations in animals, and once we get success in animal investigation, clinical investigation, then we perform the on human trials. Now there is one catch: each and every country have their own particular laws and rules and regulations to performing such clinical investigations. Some of the countries want their clinical investigation have to be performed on their human race, because as we know, each and every different countries having different human race populations, and any medical devices or any medical things like which having some clinical effects, those effects are different on different human race. Why? Because each and every human race have different genetic compositions. Apart from there, lots of similar genetic composition, but still the few things are different, and that is why they make the differences in the human races. So according to that, their physiology is also different, hence the effects of whether it's a clinical effects, whether it's a side effects, is also different on different populations. So it is very essential to perform the clinical investigations in which you want to market your medical devices. For example, if you want to market your medical device in China, so that time you need a Chinese populations, and because according to the China's rules and regulations, we have to perform that things on Chinese populations. If our medical device are fit for the Chinese population, only then we can market such medical device in China. There are the few other countries also some examples, but I don't know much more about it. But in general, wherever in whichever country you want to perform, you need to do human trial on that country only. So these are the first things. Now what we do first, so before going for the real clinical investigation, we need to make a proper plan, like how you're going to perform the clinical investigations, and the funding agencies who fund for these clinical investigations, we need to report each and everything, because clinical investigation is very costly affairs. So we need to give every information in our clinical investigation plan, like in which populations, whether it's animal or human, we're going to use, why we're going to use, and what the number of population we're going to perform, and what are the timelines, what are the costs involved, who are the funding, whether we have the ethical approval for or not for performing the clinical investigation. Because before starting or before getting into the clinical investigation, we have to take ethical approvals from the respective organizations. It depends upon country to country. So we need to report everything in clinical investigation plans. Once our plan get approved, then we're going to start our clinical investigations. As I told earlier, the clinical investigations, the strategies and path and everything is depends upon the risk of medical devices, like which category of medical devices you have, whether it's a class 3, then there is a high risk, then so much post is involved in that. Then there is class 2B, then class 2A, and then class 1, which is a low risk. Only the few exceptions where we need to perform such human and animal experiment for the class 1s. Otherwise, most of things are the low risk, so we don't need to much perform on this. We may need to perform some in vitro analysis and all. It can be suffice for the class 1 devices. So these are the few things about the clinical investigations. If you really want to know more about it, clinical investigations and clinical investigations plans, then just DM me. I will make separate videos on this and give a proper lecture on this, proper presentation on this, like how the clinical investigation plan need to be taken and how we're going to perform the clinical investigation, step-by-step process of this. So this is all about the clinical investigations. So we will meet with another videos on another topic. So till then, bye, take care.